Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. A number of stories out of Washington this week we got to chew over, and Senator John Thune is chair of the Senate Republican Conference. Senator, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, but we do have a lot to talk about, starting with this NSA, I don't know if we're going to call it a scandal, a leak, or what have you. If it was up to you, what would happen to Joseph Snowden, the self-described whistleblower in this case?
Well, look, I mean, I think you have to try, as long as you have laws on the books, and we do, you got to enforce the laws. So this is somebody who appears at least leaked sensitive, classified information, and I think he needs to be prosecuted. And I think that's, so I know this is a fast-moving story. I know there are a lot of moving parts to it, but I think it's really important that we try and get him back to the United States and try and deal with this in a way that I think gives people confidence that we're going to enforce our laws in this country.
Do you think the program itself, at least as reported, is appropriate?
You know, I think that that's a good question that you would ask that, because I think a lot of members of Congress even are, you know, we're finding out this last week that the Intelligence Committee's members knew about this, perhaps some of the leadership, but most members of Congress were not aware of how broad this thing was. And I do think that it probably suggests that we need to have additional oversight. This needs to be reviewed, but you know, clearly there are, as a result of the Patriot Act's passage, steps that are being taken to protect Americans, and we don't want to undermine that. If these steps are successful in terms of preventing terrorist attacks, preventing harm to American people, then we've got to proceed, you know, very carefully in terms of changes that we make. But I do think there hasn't been enough oversight. That needs to change. I think most members of Congress would argue that we need to be more informed about it, precisely what's going on and how it impacts the people that we represent here.
Senator, have you been privately briefed on anything that the public hasn't yet?
Well, I was in a briefing on Thursday last week, but it was only after some of these events came to light. And so, you know, to the degree that this information was made available to us, I'm not sure that most members of Congress, frankly, were aware of that. I'm sure it's true, and I think there have been over the time since about 2005 opportunities for members of Congress to drill down a little bit and find out exactly what's happening with regard to business records, the PRISM program, metadata, etc. But I don't believe that most members of Congress have probably taken advantage of the opportunities to find out more about how some of these programs are actually operating.
Well, Senator, on that score, you know, last week every company came out, and Becky was talking about this earlier, every company came out and denied involvement in the program. Now that you've been briefed on it, who's telling the truth?
Well, look, I think that I think a lot of the information that we're receiving right now, and it was in a classified setting last week, so it's hard to talk a lot about it, but that's why I think we have an issue here. I think we need to figure out what can be declassified, what in terms of additional oversight we can do so that members of Congress and the American public, to the degree they can be, are more informed, respecting the fact that there are certain classified elements of these programs that need to be preserved in order to protect Americans. But I think, Andrew, that I'd be one, I'm sure, I think I have a lot of colleagues here who would like to find out more about this program and its broad application, which is something I think most of us were aware that some of these things were being done, but perhaps not on the level that they are.
Senator, if you find out more information and there are changes that you and your colleagues decide you want to come to some of these programs as a result of what you find out of this, do you still think that Snowden should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law if it turns out that you find out things you never knew and things that concern you, and as a result changes come about?
My view on that, Becky, is as follows. I mean, there may be things that come out in the course of that suggest that there were things perhaps going on that we would like to have known more about at the time, but I still believe that if you have laws, you've got to enforce the laws. I mean, the only thing that's what our country's about. It's about the rule of law. If there are laws on the books, we have to enforce those.
Though.
Well, look, I mean, I think that, and we don't know exactly, because the facts are still coming out on this, if there's information that is leaked that puts Americans in harm, that's a very, very serious thing. And obviously this is somebody who has access to a lot of classified information. I think it's going to raise the question about whether intelligence contractors and the information that they have access to. There are a lot of things about this story, threads to it, that are still sort of unwinding, and I think we're going to have to get to the bottom of it.
Senator John Thune, thank you for joining us. Hope you come back as the story unfolds.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
When